Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Keeping It Sporty podcast here on CAUT-FM 89.5. You can listen to us on Spotify, and we are brought to you by CAUT-FM 89.5 on your dial here in Toronto and in southwestern Ontario. And a quick update before I start this episode, we are now on YouTube, so make sure to check us out there. Or you can now visit our brand new website by checking out keepingitsporty.com. On today's episode, I am fortunate to be joined by a veteran sports producer who has produced 12 Olympic Games, 2 Pan Am Games, numerous NHL, NBA, and MLB broadcasts, and much more. I welcome to this show Mr. Dave Stiff. Dave, how's it going?
Hi, Elias. How you doing? Thanks for having me on.
No problem. It's my pleasure to have you on. So, Dave, you used to work at TSN, of course, and actually you allowed me to meet one of my favorite broadcasters, Jack Armstrong, at a Raptors game one time. So I wanted to kind of re-thank you for that cool experience.
No problem. As Jack would say, hello.
Yeah. Yeah, Jack's a pretty cool guy, and yeah, he's got those cool catchphrases. He's definitely one of the best for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Dave, I wanted to ask you how you got into the field of producing sports events.
Okay, well, it's a bit of a long story, and it starts in the mid '80s. I had just graduated from the University of Toronto, history and political science, and my goal back then was to get into law school. So I'd applied to law schools. I'd written my LSATs and stuff, but I didn't get in, and that was probably because I spent a little too much time watching and playing sports. So I'm guilty on that. That's my mea culpa on the admissions issue. So this was 1984, and I was unemployed. And fortunately, a friend of mine who went to Western, and he also was unemployed, but was interested in sports just like me. Like, we talk every week. And this was back in the days when you had to pick up your hardline phone and talk. You say, like, I'll call you at 4:00 or something. And you'd talk, and we'd talk about sports. And he got into TSN from day one, which TSN went on the air September 1st, 1984. And he knew, we kept in touch, and he knew I was unemployed and a big sports fan. And by January of '85, he called me and he said, "Are you still interested in TSN?" And I said, 100%. And he passed me over to his assignment editor at the time, and I talked with him, and he actually had me in the next day for an interview and a quick tour of our little studio on 1155 Leslie, which I think is now a BMW dealership, a big shiny BMW dealership. And he said, "Okay, come in Sunday, and we'll see how it works." So I came in Sunday, and they basically sat me in front of a little TV, 12-inch TV, which is what we had back then. We had 4 in a row, and we all sat there in the newsroom. We were editorial assistants, and we were assigned games. And we'd type out our little script with time codes, and the editor would cut the highlights based on our script. And those would go on, back then it was called Sports Desk, before it was called Sports Center, before we had a tighter relationship with ESPN, closer relationship. So they would go on Sports Desk. So January 27th was a Sunday, 1985. I always remember, was my first day there, and they put me in front of a TV, and I watched the Pro Bowl, and I did a highlight pack for the Pro Bowl, and it went to air, and I couldn't believe it. And they gave me a couple more shifts, and then a couple more, and TSN was growing. We were a really small little shop, less than 100 people, maybe 60 in the whole building. And so the good thing is you got a lot of opportunities to do different things as TSN started to produce more products. So I started working on Sports Desk, then on some of the magazine shows there. There was a Blue Jays show and an Expos show. There's Jimmy Williams and the Blue Jays, Buck Rogers and the Expos, a CFL report, a call-in show with a guy named Pat Marsden, who's no longer with us. It's called It's Your Call. And then started to work on horse racing and a couple other live events as an associate producer. And then by 1991, they said, we want you to produce a horse race. So in the summer of August 1991, I produced, I think, the Canadian Pacing Derby. And that was my first live event producing. And from there, it went on.
Yeah, and it kind of spiraled on, I guess, to many more different events. And I know I was going to mention you also kind of sold me and also gave me some of those cool All-Star hats as well that you
Yes,
had. And I was actually looking at them the other day, and I was like, wow, like you got to do or have got to have done many events in the past with regards to
absolutely.
MLB and NHL, etc. So
Now,
it's very cool.
a lot of those, to be honest, a lot of those, I didn't actually produce those, but because I was our baseball, we called them control shows, studio shows. I was a studio show producer. We would go and do reports from various All-Star games. So they'd say, we're sending you to Seattle for the All-Star game, or we're sending you to the World Series in Florida or Yankee Stadium. And so I got to cover those. We basically, a lot of it would be very minimal. It would be myself, a cameraman. Like in 1997, the Marlins Cleveland World Series. It was myself as a field producer, a cameraman, and Buck Martinez. And Buck Martinez would just do live reports into Sports Desk, Sports Center, and that was basically what we did. It was a very small crew back then, but it was great being in places like Yankee Stadium and Miami. And in Miami during October is never a bad thing.
Oh, of course,
San
yeah.
Diego, yeah, places like that for World Series. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, because the Blue Jays used to be produced on TSN before, and then they moved to Sportsnet after, if I'm
Yep,
correct.
they had. We were actually. It was split for a while. Well, it was mostly on CTV, and then when TSN started, we got some games because back in the day, you didn't produce all the games. All the games weren't shown. You'd show one, maybe two games of a series. Even when I was, starting at TSN in the original building, especially if it was like an afternoon game in Kansas City or Cleveland or something like that, they wouldn't produce the game. So we'd have to get a feed of like a single camera shoot of the game, the pitcher, the batter, the hit, and we edit together a little highlight package of the game. And it wasn't until I'm trying to think the late 80s when you started to produce more like the bulk of the games. And then Sportsnet came on the scene in the 90s, late 90s, and we would split the games basically. And then when Rogers bought the Jays, then they took the bulk of the games, but we would get a few games. And then they decided later they just want to do all the games. So that's how that evolved.
Yeah, I see how the different companies obviously purchasing the games are allowed to broadcast them, which makes sense.
Yeah, and also you got to remember in the early years when there was CTV and TSN, there was no TSN 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
So if there was a Blue Jay game on, and we already had a pre-existing, we only had one channel. We had already committed to, CFL or hockey, whatever, it was tough. And so CTV would do some. So even with the Raptors, like now, it's half of them are on Sportsnet and half, or more or less half and half, are on Sportsnet, half are on TSN. So, back when I was there a few years ago, they would do a draft. Basically, the two programming executives with their assistant would come into a room and they'd look at the schedule and they'd say, "We want to do these games. We want to do these games," based on what other events they had on. And it's easier for them to do more games now for both networks because they have more channels. But still, there's a draft. So it's based on what other events you have going that day.
Yeah, that's true. And I'd imagine also kind of who the Raptors would be playing and all that kind of stuff is everybody wants the more popular games, Raptors
Yeah.
versus Lakers versus the Bucks, etc. I'm
Oh,
sure stuff like
absolutely.
that.
If you can
So,
get
yeah.
like Raptors, Celtics, Raptors,
Yeah.
like all the Sixers, anything
Yeah,
like that.
exactly. So, Dave, I was going to ask you now, I know it's probably very different in each event that you produce, but what does kind of a day in your life look like before producing a live sports event, and what kind of things or preparation go into that?
Well, preparation could start, weeks in advance, or depending on the event, or if it's a series of games, as opposed to what we call a one-off. Say they sent you to do a single event, like a hockey final or something, a junior hockey final. But I would start usually by getting a crew sheet. seeing what facilities I had, truck, crew, etc. Then you start researching the storylines. Who are your hosts? I talk with the hosts. What story should we be following? I guess that's sort of the three cornerstone rules when you walk in. You should know the sport, you should know the athletes, and you should know the storylines of the event. If you know those three, that's your foundation. And you can work with your hosts, your reporters, your director to bring all that together. So I do that, and maybe a week before, I'd talk to the PR people and say, we'd like to get an interview done, whether it be from our guys in Toronto or our local reporters, if we're flying out to Edmonton or Calgary, Winnipeg, Montreal, whatever, to do a story on one of the players, one of the key stories of the event, which would, let's say in hockey, run an intermission, or in basketball, run at halftime. Or if we had a pregame, half-hour pregame, we'd want sit-down interviews or storylines, features to build up the game. And a lot of this stuff also, we could, give clips or little snippets to Sports Center so they could start promoting our event maybe 2 or 3 days in advance. And then when you get to the event, usually fly in the day before or a couple of days before, you sort of get a lay of the land, especially if you haven't been to some of these arenas. I like to know my way around the arenas, look around and talk to the PR people and, say, introduce yourself face to face, say, thanks for your help. And here's what we're planning to do. And they can help you with a lot of stuff. It's good to know the PR people, the media relations people, because they will be the ones who set up the interviews. They will be the ones who get your credentials. They will be the ones who give you access to certain areas and things. And then you want to start working on a tease, which is your opening tease. You have an associate producer who works with you, and you come up with an idea and music and video you want to use. And so that'll be your opening tease. You get the host to voice that. And, again, you're working with a host. So you say, would you like to write the script? You want me to do it? You want to work together? You can tweak it because you want to keep everyone involved. And everyone's got great ideas, and you want to make sure you bring that out. That's part of the producer's job too, is to work with the team, especially leading up to the game, to bring everything out. And during the game, bring those stories in, and when it's appropriate. And the director too. The director now knows these storylines. He'll work with the cameras. He'll make sure that if the parents are in the crowd and a player scores, he'll know beforehand where those parents are. He'll tell the cameraman who specifically got the best shot of them, if this player scores, your job's to cut to the parents right away. And so all these things are predetermined so that when we get to the game, obviously it doesn't always go as planned, but you have a general idea, you have a general foundation of the storylines and the way you see the game progressing. And then you just buckle up and the game starts, the tip off, the puck drop, the kickoff, and you play it from there.
Well, collaboration is key, right? And
absolutely,
obviously having those relationships built up already will help make things, or the live production especially, run more smooth.
It's really, they're the teams on the field and there's the team broadcasting, and it's a real team effort. I learned that right away.
And I guess there's a lot of people involved, like behind the scenes, that you don't necessarily see, that are helping with this.
There are a ton. We don't always run credits. A lot of it's because of time. We would run credits at the end of a big event, like at the end of, let's say, the World Juniors. After the gold medal game, you'd run credits. Mm-hmm. CBC at the end of the Olympics will run credits. And a lot of it is because you're not going to run credits after every day because there's just so many people, and you don't have time. It takes a lot of time to do it. So it's a lot of people behind the scenes, a lot of names you never hear that really bring these stories to life. And it's great to work with these people because you tend to, over the years, you see them in newsrooms, in edit suites, in master control, in tape, in the truck, in audio, cameras around the facility. Your technical producer who's in charge of the truck, basically. He's the guy you go to. If he's your sort of go-to technical guy, he'll give you a layout of the arena, where the cameras are positioned. And sometimes there's an issue with one of the cameras. You have to go with him and talk with the arena's technical guy to make sure that the camera isn't blocked. Or they do something called seat kills, which I don't know if you've heard of. Basically, it's usually these smaller arenas. And the bigger arenas, the camera positions are already preset, especially the modern ones. They're all pre-patched, preset. You don't need to drag a lot of cables. There's sort of little plugs there. You can plug the cables right in. They're really TV friendly. A lot of these old arenas, not so much. So you basically have to work with these people and say, look, we really need to have a camera here to get this angle, a proper angle of the game. Can you take these seats out? So seat kills, basically, they're called. So we build a stand over the seats so we can put the camera on top of it. But that's also predetermined. And again, working with your team, working with the technical producer, who will say, "Look, we need 6 seats across by 3 seats deep to put a proper platform on, because these cameras are heavy and the cameraman doesn't want to fall over, and you worry about blocking people behind you too. But that's part of the event, especially like in these smaller, older arenas."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, bonds are definitely important in making things happen. And I mean, I was going to ask you, would you say within this industry, there's a lot of jobs available, in your opinion?
I don't, to be honest, I don't study the job charts on a day-to-day basis, but I do every so often. I'll get a list of jobs.
Mm-hmm.
It's different than the list you'd see 20 years ago because technology's changed.
Oh, yeah.
From editing to now you'd have online producers, you'd have podcast producers, you'd have different roles that didn't exist. So there's certainly an evolution in the industry, and a lot of it's technical, and a lot of it's the way social media has evolved. So there are jobs, I think, because there are opportunities based on and watch how companies expand, and watch how, as they expand, they want to promote their product, distribute their product, whatever, and it becomes more multimedia, TV, radio, podcasts, the website designers. There's another one, tsn.ca. Might not, didn't really exist when I started. There were no computers, there were typewriters.
Yeah,
And now tsn.ca has got its own big department, and it's vital and it's thriving.
Well, actually, that kind of leads me into my next question about, with the advancement of technology, how have you seen production change over the years?
The ability to do things. Back in the old days, when we would go and do an interview and we'd want to feed it back to the newsroom, and we weren't the main broadcaster, we'd book time out of a truck. We'd have to book a 15-minute window, and they'd say, you got between 10 o'clock and 10:15 to go and feed your tapes. We'd have to do the interviews in the locker room, run out after the game, go into the truck, and you didn't even have cell phone. Go into the truck, get on the hardline phone to the assignment editor and say, we're feeding now. Do you see us? You see our line open? And yeah, okay. So use this clip. Here's our host stand up, and you can use footage of the home run and the great play at the plate, stuff like that. And that's sort of your post game wrap. And you have to do it like that. Now it's almost instantaneous. Even if you're on an island, they have these big briefcases, and I haven't used them in a few years, but they're called DeGeros. Basically, open up the briefcase, plug in your camera, and it's an instant satellite, and you can walk anywhere. You can walk at a street corner and start doing live stuff. And editing has changed from the old popping in tapes, these big old clunky tapes, and just trying to be able to get it dissolved, to now everything's computerized. Everything's in drives, and everyone can access it. And if you have 10 suites, they can all access this great home run at any time. If someone needs the home run for the headlines, if someone needs the home run for a bumper to break, if someone needs the home run to use it as a sponsored element, like play of the day, if someone's cutting a highlight pack, if someone's cutting a wrap pack, and they want to use that, they can all use it from different suites. Whereas in the old days, we only had 6 tape machines, so you'd record 6 games, and you'd have to, these 1-hour tapes, you'd pop out the tape, put in a second one, and you'd go run. And this is the tape with the home run. Who needs it first? Okay, headlines needs it first. Quick, you guys cut it. Cut headlines. Okay, we're going to try and cut a highlight pack. Then give it to bumpers and like that. And it was slow, and it was why you see these old movies of people running down the halls with tapes, which actually did happen on a few occasions, to run the highlight tape to tape room. And we're on air in 2 minutes. Okay, I'm cutting the last highlight. Quick, we're cutting the last out. Bang, got it. Okay, you'd run it in, and you'd run by the controller and say, the pack's 58 seconds plus 6 minutes, 6 seconds pad, and you'd run it in and you'd run the script in. And it was, whereas now it's all on computer, everything, and prompter, script, the info sheet for the PA. It's so much better, and gives you so many more options, because with more people working on it, you can build better headlines, better bumpers, better elements, better like highlights of the night, whatever. And of course, the edit suites are better too. They're all digitalized, especially the high-end Avid suites that allow you to edit top-level production pieces.
There was a lot of moving pieces back then. It felt like, for now, it's more fluid.
Technology has helped that, because even like the simplest things, like a script. Like if I was doing a script, we would have these sheets called 7-part green, which is basically 1 sheet of white and 6 sheets of green that are all together, and you type your highlights on it. So each paragraph would be a highlight, and it could be 1 or 2 pages. Try and do it on 1. 2, you'd have to literally like almost tape together. And it was 7-part green because you'd split it at the end, and the white sheet would go to the prompter, which would be taped together. It would roll through this sort of camera that would put the script on the camera for the host, so we could looking at it, and there'd be a prompter operator who'd run the machine that would run the script up. So, top of the first inning, George Bell at the plate, 3-run home run. Jay's up quickly, 3-0, and the other 6 scripts, the paper scripts, would go to the host, 2 of them. The director would get one, so we could mark his scripts. We know which host was reading it. The PA would get one. The producer would get one, so we could look at it. And we could give one to audio too, because there might be some audio cues. Like you might, in the middle of a highlight pack, put the sound up of the call. So the host would have to know, the PA would have to know that there's 22 seconds of spoken highlights before you'd have to pause and get the call. And then that call would last 12 seconds. Then the host would be coming again. So everything would be, you'd have to time it out, like literally almost manually, and write these notes to the PA. And he would have to like just time it down. And the host would have to be able to hear this, say, pause in 3, 2, 1, pause. So there's a lot of people just, a lot of it was fingers crossed back in the day. But again, you're watching at home, it looks great. You don't know what the craziness is going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, back then it must have been so difficult because the timing would have had to have been perfect. Whereas with the advancement of technology now, it's a little bit easier, we could say.
In a perfect world, in a perfect world, which none of us really live in, but we aspire to live in, we'd be on the air at whatever, 10 or maybe 10:30 if we were late. And you could give the host a chance to look at it, like rehearse it, so he would know when to pause. If the hosts get a chance to actually look at your highlight packs and read the script, they may put their own little words in, their own little subtleties in too. So that 60 seconds of looking at a highlight pack and reading a script made the world of difference when you actually got to air. Rehearsal means a lot. I always rehearse the opening before a show, rehearse these little things. It makes a huge difference.
Practice makes perfect, right?
That's 100%. Especially when you're live, when you're going to do something live, because I tell everyone, you're live. Once it goes to air, you don't get a do-over.
Exactly.
It's
once it's out there, it's out there forever, right? So
100%.
It's better to be prepared. Okay, so moving on to my next kind of question now. I was wondering if there is one experience that you've produced that has been kind of like basically your coolest memory or experience that you've been a part of, in your opinion. You have to jog the memory a little bit. I know there's been a lot of them, I'd imagine. So
yeah,
might be tough to pick one, but
like a game or event or moment.
Whatever you want, game, event, moment. There may be different answers, I guess, but
yeah, I mean, an event like any Olympics. I was at the Calgary Olympics in '88, and that was surreal because TSN was very young. It really put us on the map. The Olympics in Sydney, Australia, like to fly to Sydney, Australia, and to be part of that whole thing too. The Summer Olympics was awesome. Just anytime I think of those, Calgary Sydney, things like that. I smile. Being at World Series and just walking around.
Taking in the moment, yeah, what that
Yeah,
must feel like.
walking around old Yankee Stadium, and I mean, so many different moments, meeting different people, and just meeting their face. Like, here's a story I tell everyone that they seem to be amused by. So 2017 Raptor playoffs, we're doing our usual pregame shows and stuff, and it's a day off. It's a practice day, so I go to the other team's media relations guy, who I again build relationships with these people, get them to know you and stuff, and don't ask too many favors. Pick your spots. And I asked him. I said, "Look, doing a pregame show. Love to have a sit down interview for 8 to 10 minutes with a player, with our reporter." And I said, "Any players available? Like, is that doable?" I sort of knew his answer in advance, but he said, "You're not getting any of the stars. They're just too busy. They're tired. They don't have time to do single interviews. They basically do what they call these scrums most of the time, which is fine. I get it." And he said, "I think we can, I think we might be able to have a player for you, Channing Frye, traded to us." I said, "Oh, great stories, great interview." He said, "Okay, I'll ask him." So he goes in the locker room, comes out like a minute later, says, "Sure, he'll do it. No problems. Yeah, you can go in." He's at his locker. The room's empty. So we walk in, it's empty. Everyone's gone. So we're the only people in there, which is great. And so we set up the camera, reporter's sitting beside him. I say, "Thanks. I really appreciate this. This is awesome. And let's just do an interview and we'll chat about this is stuff we'll chat about." He says, "Great." So we start doing the interview. We've got the whole room to ourselves. Everything's going well. Another player sits down like 3 or 4 lockers away, starts cranking the music as a total joke. And he starts singing, Channing Frye, he's so great, this. And my reporter looks at me like, I go, keep going. It's live. We're in the moment. Let's have fun. Like, this is, we're the only camera in the room. Let's just enjoy the moment. And my cameraman looks at me, and I basically give him the pan over to the other player, pan back, pan over, just enjoy the moment. Mm-hmm. And this went on for like 8-10 minutes, and it was great. And we had some fun. Every so often the other player would crank up the music again just to give us some grief or tease him on an answer. And then at the end of the interview, I thank Chance. "Thanks very much. Really appreciate it. This was more interesting than my usual interviews." And we laughed. I looked at the second player and I said, "If I'd known this was going to happen, we could have done karaoke night." And the second player laughed too. And the second player, LeBron James.
Oh my gosh!
And
really?
and I said to my cameraman afterwards, I said, like, never stop rolling. Like, we're the only camera in the room. LeBron's relaxed, having fun, teasing Channing. This is something no one else has got. Mm-hmm. So
it's very unique, of course.
Yeah, it was fun, and it was just nice. A nice moment. Other than the usual, we've got to give it 100% and respect our opponents and play within ourselves and whatever the usual cliche. It was just it was relaxing. So that was fun to do.
And it goes to show you that not everything has to be serious. You can add a little bit of a fun element to it, and it really relaxes the mood. So
yeah, especially if it's natural. Like, mm-hmm. You don't want to pre-script too much. If it's sort of natural and organic and just having fun and it's just sort of happening, and it just felt really cool. So which is a nice treat, right? Yeah. Especially since we were the only camera there.
Of course, and that usually doesn't happen. There's usually, like you said, multiple cameras, multiple. I mean, I've watched post-game interviews before. There's 10 different microphones, 10 different people standing there all asking questions. So to have the room by yourself, it's kind of it's nice. It's a nice feeling.
We were like, so that was a good moment. But it's I've had a few, a lot probably, that I'd have to really start to catalog. But just meeting different athletes, or meeting different, like meeting Vin Scully at exhibition, or at the Big O in Montreal.
Oh, that must have been a treat. Wow.
We were getting ready to do some pregame stuff, and I was on the field, and the field was empty. It's 3 hours before the game, and I'm just standing there, and Vin Scully walks out. Like, obviously Dodgers Expos game, and I'm like, I don't know what to say. "Hi, Mr. Scully." And he basically How you doing, young man? You know where I can get a chair around here? I just got off the plane. My back's a little sore. 1 minute, I'm running around, grab a chair. Mr. Scully, here's a chair, Mr. Scully.
Oh, that's awesome! Wow.
Yeah, just sort of natural conversation, which I find is the coolest thing.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool right there to have met Vin Scully for sure.
Yeah.
Very nice. What would you say is the easiest and most difficult thing in producing? Might be a tough one to
Easiest.
answer.
Yeah, it's tough. I guess that's the easiest. I don't know if there's any easy thing. It's just if you have a good team with you, when you walk into the truck or the control room, you feel at ease. You say, okay, like whatever happens, if we lose a feed, if there's a technical issue, you know, we got a great group. They'll support us. And yeah, the most difficult thing, I don't know the most difficult thing. If you do have a technical issue, we have had feeds go down and I'm doing a control show in the middle of a game and it's like the feed's gone down. Oh, what do we do? But a lot of it, hopefully you pre-plan. Like it comes up quickly, or for instance, I'll use a Jays game as an example. When I was doing Jays control, if we have a feed go down, which would occasionally happen back in like the 90s or whatever, we could come back to our studio. Hopefully we had a couple highlights from other games standing by. And then as the show evolved, we got to the point where we were allowed to go to other games. Usually it was the end of our game because we had to fill till 10 o'clock to Sports Center. Sports Center would not come on. Sports Desk would not come on right after the game ended. If the game ended at 9:40, you had to fill till 10 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
So we would do something called diamond surfing. But if the feed went down, it'd be a bit of a scramble. And we go to another game. So we'd come back on camera to our hosts in the studio. Sorry, feed's gone down, we're working on it. In the meantime, let's go check out Braves Phillies. Great game going on. Like we'd predetermine. Mm-hmm. I'd say, if we have an issue, Braves Phillies is our primary surf game. We just call it diamond surfing. So
well, yeah, I was gonna say often now what they do is if, like, for example, we're watching a Blue Jays game on Sportsnet, what they could do is also, if they don't want to go back to kind of the pre-show, is they could go to another feed of the game. Like, for example, if it's the Jays and the Astros, they can go to the Astros feed. I've seen that happen a few times as well. They've got to the other feed.
Yeah, what we do though is we wouldn't necessarily have the Astros feed ready all the time. Depends on if we had a bunch of satellites, we'd have them all in a row, all the games up. Like we'd have routers in our control room, and each of the routers would have different games. So we'd be watching different games because we want to turn around highlights quickly for in-game highlights, out-of-town scores, in-game during little breaks. And so I'd usually just do other games, but we would also, you're right, if there's another feed coming up, there was like, whatever, the Jays Astros and the Astros feed was, we'd have that up too. So, but these are things that have to be sort of prearranged at the beginning of the season with, management people. They'd say, if our feed goes down, can we go to yours? This all has to be, in the old days, I don't know if we were allowed to do that. You just go to another network's feed without asking them. That would be, you have to have these contracts
predetermined. But
they pretty much all are now. Like, everyone's dotted I's and crossed T's. And again, this is part of the pre-planning before the season starts. You can use our feed, we'll use yours, your problem. Just let us know, sort of thing. And you might get that sometimes. If you had a really good relationship, sometimes you could phone the master control, let's say in Houston, if you scramble around and say, hi, we're having a feed problem. TSN Toronto, TSN Canada has joined you. I get in trouble if I say TSN Toronto. TSN Canada has joined you. And if you're lucky, every so often you get their announcers would say, and welcome the people in Canada watching on TSN. So sometimes you get that, which is cool. Then everything's working as well as it can, and it's sort of neat.
Mm-hmm. I mean, to go to another broadcast for just a few minutes, it would help, I'm sure. And it's also a thing for viewership, I'd imagine, so that you don't lose necessarily all these viewers that say, oh, look, the feed went down, or whatever the case may be. Yeah,
or if that was unavailable, we'd go to another game. Like we'd say, what's the next best game? Like if Jays are playing whatever, Houston, and say Baltimore was playing Tampa, which would be really interesting for Jays fans. We'd say, look, we'll be back. Let's check in on Baltimore and Tampa.
Yeah.
So give value add. And even, back then in the old days at the end of the Jays game, if it ended early, we'd say, big win for the Jays, Baltimore and Tampa in the bottom of the ninth. Let's go there. And so we go there for however long that inning went.
Yeah, and it makes things more interesting, of course.
Yeah, and I always thought, if I'm a fan at home, what would I enjoy? That's another thing as a producer or director, anyone. If you're a
Putting
fan
your
at
own
home,
opinion in there, of course, it helps.
yeah, what would you enjoy? What would you like to see? What's entertaining? The balance of entertainment and information.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I want to personally thank Mr. Dave Stiff for joining the show this week and sharing a lot of cool stories and memories with the Keepin' It Sporty podcast, as he is a true inspiration to us all. You've been listening to the Keepin' It Sporty podcast on CAUT FM 89.5. Don't forget to listen to us on Spotify, YouTube, or on our website at keepinitsporty.com, and make sure to follow us on Instagram at keepinitsporty. That's KEEPIN with no G, it sporty, SPORTY. I've been your host, Elias Drakos. So long.